Right. All right.
Okay. It started. It is on now. Yeah.
Tell you what, it is 7:33. So let us begin. So good evening, fellow commissioners and the general public. My name is Michael Champness, and I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Commission. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county website and on YouTube. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by new state legislation and FOIA, the Transportation Advisory Commission needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It is a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of this commission is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. I'm asking each commission member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location, city, from which you are participating when I mention your name. At large, Linda Sperling.
Hello, this is Linda Sperling, and I am participating from my home in lovely Clifton, Virginia.
Fantastic. Braddock District, Kevin Morse.
Kevin Morse from Burke, Virginia.
Fantastic. I am here, Hunter Mill District, Kelly Westenhoff.
This is Kelly Westenhoff participating from my mother's home in El Paso, Texas.
Okay, thank you. Mason District, Roger Hoskin. Can you hear us and can you respond? Okay, we know he's here. Thank you, Kelly. All right, let's pass over roster. We'll come back. Mount Vernon District, Pete Sitnick.
Pete Sitnick here from Mount Vernon District.
Fantastic. Lee District, Alexis Glenn. I don't believe she's going to be here with us this evening, but is she here? I see an AG. Alexis, are you with us? That does not appear so. Okay. Providence District, Jeremy Hancock.
Hi, Jeremy Hancock in Falls Church.
Okay. Springfield District, Eric Thiel. I know Eric had some things to do this evening too. Okay. Sully District, Davis Kiles. Okay. I see Roger has popped back up again. Roger, can you hear us and respond? Okay. We can see you. We can tell you can hear us. Can you say anything?
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I can see you and I can hear you. Miracles never cease.
Fantastic.
Well, Calvin and
Roger's
I
with us.
were on the air at 7 o'clock trying to straighten this out. And then,
Appreciate you trying to work through it. It looks like you've been successful, so that's good news.
yeah, well, this is the most convoluted piece of software I've ever seen. My opinion, it's another piece of crap from Microsoft.
There we go. Unfortunately, we're being recorded here, but those need not go in the minutes, Roger. You control
That's
those.
quite all right with me. I'm transparent on that.
Sounds good.
Does Roger need to identify where he's from?
Yeah,
He should. Yes. Where are you from, Roger? Where are you
I am here in Mason District at Seven Corners in Falls Church.
All right.
Bill Gates wants to know that. He'll be contacting you shortly.
Exactly. A different Alexis will be looking over your shoulder. Just to loop back, Alexis Glenn, are you with us, Commissioner Glenn? Okay, and Eric Thiel. Okay. Fairfax Area Disability Services Board, our esteemed Vice Chair, Mary Pauline Jones. Are you with us?
This is Mary Pauline Jones. I am here from my home in the town of Herndon.
Fantastic.
And I can see you.
Okay.
Too.
So it looks like we have a quorum, just missing 3. So next, at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the aforementioned esteemed Vice Chair Mary Pauline Jones, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion.
Thank you. I accept the virtual gavel. I now recognize Commissioner Champness.
Thank you. I move that we have determined that each member's voice can be adequately heard by each other member of the commission. It is so moved.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Braddock.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
May I
The next
suggest
group-
that everybody mute if they're not the one talking? There's some kind of feedback, like a TV or radio or something.
Okay, all right, good advice. Thank you, Kelly. I next move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this commission to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. I further move that this commission may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line and that the public may access this meeting by the Microsoft Teams online platform or by calling 1-571-429-5982 and entering phone conference ID 536-480-046#. The phone number for ADA is 711. The access information is also available on the TAC website. It is so moved.
I can
Is there-
second that in Mount Vernon.
Thank you.
Okay,
Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
thank you again. Finally, I move that all of the matters on the agenda previously furnished and posted on the TAC website are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of this commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Braddock, second.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously. I now pass back the virtual gavel.
Thank you very much. We will now start the tax business per the approved agenda. So the first thing is any chair's remarks. I have none at the beginning of the meeting here. We'll have some remarks at the end of the meeting. Would like to welcome our public and guests. Obviously, esteemed colleagues from FCDOT who will be with us this evening. Do ask you identify yourselves when we speak here. I'll make sure we got your names for the minutes there. Are there any other folks here this evening that I should welcome and identify? Okay, sounds good. All right. What we'll next be doing is acceptance of the previous meeting minutes. Calvin had sent out the minutes earlier this evening. I hope commissioners have had a chance to look at it. What I'd like to do is entertain a motion to approve the minutes, and then we will discuss that motion and make any changes we need to. So, motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Mount
Okay.
Vernon District.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Sitnick. And is there a second on the motion?
Braddock.
Second motion. Discussion on the motion. I do know that there was some comments on the minutes there.
No, I think.
Commissioner Hancock, could I call on you perhaps if you've got make your comments, please.
Sure. I just one small change. Let me find the section on the safe routes to school. I'll just suggest on the second paragraph, the first sentence, we're going to strike that because it suggests that we approved a motion, which we did discuss, but we didn't ultimately approve a motion. I'm going to suggest that we strike that and replace it instead with the TAC discussed having the chairman send a letter to the BOS highlighting the elimination, excuse me, of the Safe Routes to School coordinator position and the commission's perspective on the importance of supporting active transportation in the county. And then period, and then the new sentence will start. Commissioners discuss sending the letter to the BOS, and we'll continue the rest of the paragraph there.
Okay, I'll consider
Seems
that a
reasonable.
friendly amendment, so it's okay with me.
Okay, fantastic. And yes, we did not pass a motion, so this seems an appropriate change. Jeremy, thanks for pointing that out. Is there any other discussion on the motion? And the motion would be to accept the meeting minutes as amended by the comments from Commissioner Hancock. Are there any other adjustments or changes we need to make to the minutes? Okay, hearing no other comments, call the vote on the motion. The motion to approve the minutes as amended by Commissioner Hancock. All those in favor say aye.
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 And I would like to note that I'm abstaining because I wasn't there, so I can't speak as to the veracity of anything.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we have we don't need to have a voice vote. I think we can have when we have an abstention. I'm not sure the procedures here. Do we need to have a recorded vote so we can note who abstained, or just note that we passed unanimous by voice vote with one abstention, Commissioner Westenhoff? I'm not sure.
You can just note the abstention.
We'll just note the abstention then. Okay, sounds good. Okay, are there any other, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Abstaining, 1. Any opposed? Okay. All right, the motion to adopt the meeting minutes is adopted unanimously with save 1 abstention. Okay. Fantastic. We are now on to the meat of the agenda, our first topic. Very pleased to have with us this evening from FCDOT a very good group of folks who will be talking about the parking reimagine. As we know, this has been something that we've been paying attention to for some time. It is in our work plan there. I know that Roger has been very involved in this, Jeremy. I know you've had interest as well. A number of us have had interest in this topic, and so welcome the chance to talk to you about it. Michael, pleased that you could join us this evening, and please also reach out to us. We like it when folks talk to us. We'll hunt people down, but we always like it when folks come and are willing to come talk to us. So we'll try and be a cordial guest, a cordial host for your coming with us this evening. One thing I would ask, sir, if you could please introduce your team so we can say hello to them, and also again make sure we know who's here this evening. But with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Davis, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you very much for having us. And the members of my team tonight are, and I by the way, I'm with Land Development Services in Fairfax County, and we are working cooperatively with the Department of Planning and Development on this parking project, which is focused on off-street parking. I know FCDOT is working on their on-street parking project, so not to confuse you too much, but our project is looking at off-street parking and Article 6 of the Fairfax County zoning ordinance. We're looking at that section of the ordinance for this project. And we have 2 members of the DPD contingent here tonight, as well as a representative of our consulting team. And I'll introduce the DPD team first. We have Austin Gestrell and Bill Mayland of the DPD team, and they're my counterparts on this project. We also have Ian Banks with us tonight, who's with Nelson Nygaard, and they are our consultant on this project for technical support and other elements of the project.
Fantastic, fantastic.
I have a presentation. I'm hoping to be able to run this.
Okay.
If not, Calvin, hopefully will be able to supplement. But let me see if I can get this going. Okay.
There it is.
Great. An examination of our off-street auto parking regulations in the county zoning ordinance is long overdue. As will be described in our staff presentation, human behavior, land development, technology, and other factors have changed auto parking demand, and the parking that is supplied for this should adapt to these changes. Parking should not be a given, but instead should be considered a land resource that competes with other values when land is developed. The project continues with public engagement, and staff is seeking your input and perspectives on parking. This feedback is essential in our examination of parking and developing our project priorities. Your comments and conversations tonight will provide important background for the project. Most people own one or more vehicles and take for granted that they will be able to park these vehicles in their travels. Most of the time, people don't generally think about parking unless they can't find a convenient spot or there's an unexpected number of vehicles parked near their home. Yet parking is everywhere around us. Most every land use in the county requires some parking. When people drive and park, they're focused on finding a convenient space. They don't often notice the gray empty edges that rarely have any vehicles parked there. A key purpose of our project is to have people think about parking a little differently, to begin to think of it as a resource. And when you do that, you begin to consider the importance of that resource relative to other important elements that we all care about, such as the environment, affordability, and land design. When parking has a community value, then you can think about how that value should be weighed against other initiatives. Parking is a land use, just like residences, office buildings, and shopping centers. This project intends to imagine how best to utilize that land resource. While the county is moving toward multimodal development that encourages more transportation options such as walking, biking, and transit, driving is and will remain a common activity. This, of course, will require us to park these vehicles. Therefore, providing parking with land use activities will still be necessary. This project recognizes that parking will continue to be supplied. However, it's important that parking be sized to the average demand for it. The term that was created for this is right-sizing parking, which is to not underbuild or overbuild parking supply for a land use. While we strive to right-size parking and requirements, we also know there are places and uses that present parking challenges. This project will take in that information and look for ways to address those areas. Here I'll provide background information on some elements of parking that hopefully gives some insight on the operation of and influences on parking and the role these play in considering changes to the requirements. Parking has times of high and low demand. This can occur by the hour, day, month, or year. People know that during the holiday season, more people are out shopping, and this increases parking demand. In January and February, less people are shopping and parking is freely available. While there can be times when it is difficult to find a parking space, parking should be constructed to address average demand. Within the county, there are places where you need a car for almost any activity beyond your home, and there are places where there are options that don't require a car. The character and location of a site can influence parking demand. In urbanized and higher density transit-oriented areas, options that allow less reliance on a personal vehicle are available. It can even be possible to be car-free. This lowers the need for dedicated parking areas. Also, there are development areas known as mixed use that contain residences, places of work, shopping, and entertainment options. These types of combined uses can reduce the need for vehicle ownership for people who live or work there. Because the mixed-use area has these closely located options, residents or employees can walk or bike. As one potential result, residents in these areas may decide to own only one vehicle instead of two, which reduces overall parking demand. Because parking is a resource, it can be operated to enhance its value. An example of this is shared parking. Rather than building the minimum required parking for an apartment building, an office building, and a retail center located on the same site, the demand for each of these uses can be studied and a smaller parking area can be built that provides enough parking for all these uses based on hourly demand. Looking now and toward the future, parking demand is changing with technology and people's behavior. Everyone's familiar with online ordering and home delivery of pretty much anything. This reduces parking demand when you don't have to go out to shop or eat. Also, even before COVID, remote working was growing annually. As we transition away from COVID, remote working is expected to continue to occur. These trends and other technologies to come will continue to influence the need for parking. Parking areas should be considered a resource to the entire community. It's land area that we have made a choice to use as parking. It could have been used for something else. When we consider the development of land, there are many elements that can be weighed, such as the environment, site design, and affordability. These are balanced with the need to provide parking, and sometimes the parking supply itself creates a need to address its effects, like stormwater runoff. Many times, the parking requirements for a site control how a site can be used. Questions we're asking with this project are the extent of parking's role in land use. How much parking do we really need? What are the trade-offs for less or more parking on a site? Where can we balance parking supply with other site use possibilities that will provide a community benefit? We want people to begin to think about priorities related to parking. Should a large amount of convenient parking be the ideal? Or can we think about balancing car parking against other desirable features like a quality urban streetscape that is inviting to safely walk and bike, or more open green space to enjoy cooling shade? Perhaps this gray slate could be redeveloped to trade a low-performing asset into a project that will generate added tax revenue to the county that can be applied to achieving our values. Every change has a consequence. If we were to look at a current problem with parking supply, how could we address it? Adding more parking is a solution, but what effects might that have? In any land use option, parking becomes part of a cost-benefit decision. What are the ideals we should be considering when making these decisions? Looking at the photo in the slide, if we wanted to add more parking to address the high demand depicted here, do we want to remove those trees in the background to add it? Or would having those trees be important enough to tolerate this amount of parking demand for a few hours a day? These are among the questions that we would like you to think about as you listen to our presentation tonight. Community engagement is a critical element of this project. We're seeking meaningful feedback from all elements of the community who have personal experiences and thoughts about parking. But the community also includes business owners and tenants, land developers, nonprofit organizations, and religious assembly groups. Our engagement on this project will include those folks as well. We'll also use our technological resources, which enhances our reach to the community. Electronic meetings such as this will continue to be held, which increases participation opportunities. Our project website is also a great resource for project info. This project will focus on off-street parking and loading. We have 3 basic goals for the project. Adding best practices and new ideas for parking now and in the future. This includes looking more at the context of a site or area to determine its parking needs. Increasing clarity and flexibility in the administrative language of the ordinance. Streamlining parking review and approval, which includes increasing predictability of review processes, times, and outcomes. I'll now introduce Ian Banks, who is with our consulting team of Nelson Nygaard. He'll provide background on their important role in this project and the activities they'll be working on to support it. Ian?
Thanks, Mike. My name is Ian Banks. I'm a principal here at Nelson Nygaard in our Washington, D.C. office. We're a national transportation planning firm with about 150 staff, and we all work on creating more sustainable, equitable, efficient transportation systems. I've been in the field, particularly in parking and transportation demand management for about the last 20 years, including most recently, before I joined Nelson Nygaard about 8 years ago, I was at the city of Annapolis in Maryland, heading up their parking division and how that begins to play a role with the transit system that Annapolis ran and still does run, as well as their active transportation services as well. As Mike mentioned, our team is here to support staff in developing the recommended code changes to bring before the Board of Supervisors. As you may well be aware, the parking elements of the code haven't received an overhaul since 1988, and our communities, our economy, they were quite different then. As Mike mentioned, just consider how the internet has changed our travel, how it's changed deliveries, how we now get real-time transit information, and that's certainly begun to change even more so throughout the last 2 years under the pandemic. Changes to the code could certainly include a range of things that Mike has described, so minimum requirements, shared parking, changes to loading and queuing, but ultimately this work begins to look to the future. So how will development happen? How does it connect to your values as well as the values of the community? And sort of these values currently are expressed through the county's comprehensive plan, the strategic plan, and other plans that will be ongoing throughout the life of these code changes as well. And so we know that efficient and varied transportation options, which are sustainable, safe, accessible, affordable, and ultimately equitable as well, are going to play a key role in moving forward. Along with our partners at Clarion Associates, we're undertaking a number of different activities in support of the staff project, the Parking Reimagined. Many of our first steps have been attending town hall meetings that we've done in each district, and certainly speaking with groups such as yourselves, and hearing about how you as your group begin to take a look at parking. In addition to hearing about sort of your experiences, we're working on a couple of other fronts as well. We obviously understand how complex the county's development is, from Tysons to Reston to Springfield to less dense, almost rural areas. And we know that these diverse places are going to need carefully crafted solutions. So we're beginning to gather local data, predominantly from sort of the pre-COVID era, 2019 and earlier, to understand what the current parking supply, demand, and impacts are. But also at the same time, we've been reaching out to other jurisdictions about how they've modernized their parking requirements, get an understanding of how the changes that they have made in sort of recent years has begun to impact their communities. And we've been looking at obviously locations and jurisdictions close to Fairfax County, as well as best practices from around the country as well. But we're also trying to learn from recent experience in Fairfax County. So how have recent development projects treated parking? How have the community and staff and the board reacted to perhaps parking waivers, parking variances that have come before them in the last few years as well? And we're going to complement all of that understanding with an evaluation of transportation and development trends as well. So how do we think transportation will begin to change in the next year, even in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, not just looking at obviously the COVID recovery, but into a future where ultimately peak traffic demand is probably going to be lower than what we see now. And finally, what we will do, along with staff, will develop proposed changes to the zoning code. And as Mike had mentioned earlier, the administrative processes that go along with that, and come up with these recommendations that ultimately serve the needs of the various different locations around the county and the various different districts, but also connecting to your values that we highlighted earlier as well, that are outlined in the comp plan and the strategic plan and things. So I'll hand it back to Mike, and he'll begin to share with you where we go forward from here. Mike.
Thanks very much, Ian. We've entered a very dynamic stage of our project currently. We had, as Ian mentioned, we've had a number of town hall meetings with various supervisor districts, and that has gotten us some very valuable information and perspectives that are kind of being built into this project. But we also have begun to evaluate a proposal for the project that involves taking an approach of consideration of how diverse the county is, in the sense that we're diverse geographically, as well as in other important factors. And so the approach that we're beginning to consider is one that would kind of take a tiered structure for parking and align parking, minimum parking requirements with density and intensity in areas of the county. So we've gotten a proposal from Nelson Nygaard, the consultant, and we've begun to look at that and starting to evaluate it based on tiers, simplistically tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And tier 1 being the lower density areas of the county, tier 2 being sort of the medium density areas, and tier 3 being the higher density areas. So we're looking at that, as well as looking at the influence of transit within each of those tiers. So parking could be geared to the availability of transit within the tiers, within tiered areas, and also the rates that we would have would also be reflective of the intensity and density of these tiers. So in the lower tier, you would have probably very few changes to the approach that we have today for parking. pretty much universally in the county. The medium tier would probably have a little bit more more attention to lower rates within that area because of the density and intensity of the development. Aligns itself with an ability to look at lower parking supply. And in that area as well, we are considering maximum rates for transit areas. And then in the highest one, which would be more akin to Tyson's or other transit station areas in the county, we would be looking at frequent use of no minimum requirements, such as what we have in Tyson's today for a lot of uses, and some and maximum requirements as well, again, similar to Tyson's. So just wanted to bring you up to speed on that a little bit. We did talk to the Planning Commission last week and began this conversation about this next step of the project, and where we hope to be going with a proposal, and we're moving toward talking to the Board of Supervisors on March 15th to provide more details about this proposal as we continue to evaluate it. So I just wanted to let you know that, in addition to the timing information that is on the screen. And then we have opportunities for engagement with us. We're certainly very interested in hearing about perspectives and experiences related to off-street parking. And so we have the project website here for information and to share information with us. We have a lot of information on the website, and we keep adding to it as we go along with the project. And it also, the website provides important information on upcoming meetings and things of that nature that people might be interested in participating in. So that ends my discussion this evening, but we are here to answer any questions that you might have, or if you want to share perspectives with us about parking and the project, we are certainly ready to hear from you all about that. So I thank you once again for the invitation to speak, or the acceptance of our request to speak, and continue this dialogue.
Fantastic, Michael. I appreciate it very much. Very interesting project, very interesting presentation. I do have a couple questions come to mind, but I would like to defer to commissioners first. So let's let Roger give it a start here.
No.
Commissioner Hoskin.
Okay, can you hear me? Because I've had some
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, Michael, I was the one that emailed you last week, and you'd responded to that email. Are you familiar with the book, The High Cost of Free Parking? I imagine you are.
Very familiar with that publication.
In 2 words, what do you think of it? we won't tell anybody.
Well, I think it's a very important piece of literature. It's changed the paradigm of parking, of discussions about parking and considerations of parking in multiple ways. Clearly, the title of the book lends itself to the financial implications of parking, not only from the standpoint of the cost of providing parking, but the cost to us, the consumers, that is inherent with parking. That, obviously people, when they go to shop or eat, and they park at the location that they're at their destination, they don't really consider, they typically don't have to pay for parking, but they don't consider that whenever they buy something or eat something, that the cost of maintaining that parking or constructing that parking is part of the cost of, the goods and services that people are buying. So, it's an important milestone book in the realm of parking, as well as land use and development in communities.
Oh, one of the things that was pointed out there is actually the high cost of building and maintaining parking spaces. It's expensive for a retailer, and it gets baked into the cost of goods sold, whether it's a Home Depot or a restaurant. And I'm glad, so the way you guys took off tonight, I kind of figured you were familiar with that work. I could just tell. But his solutions are rather radical. I don't think that we are going to be able to scale that hurdle here in Fairfax County, at least not right away. I think your tiered approach is probably a reasonable way of going at it. Because we're going to have to raise the cost of parking. Because as long as it's zero, you're going to use it infinitely. And that's why we get to maybe on-street parking. We may have to make people pay for it. And zoning variances, like over here at Seven Corners, they had this enormous parking place. Now they've got 5 restaurants in there, and I'm sure that was a zoning variance for the parking requirements. And that parking spot is still a third empty most of the time. And you alluded to that in your presentation. You just have an awful lot of parking. And I suppose back in the 1960s, when the county really developed, parking could be conceived as a free good. It sure isn't anymore. I mean, not with the cost of building, with the demand for it, and with the environmental concerns. I mean, you just can't lay down asphalt. You have to consider runoff and control of effluent for that parking space. So it's a very, very expensive resource. I think was one of the thrusts in that book that Shoup laid out pretty clearly. It's just very expensive to build it, maintain it, and you're going to pay for it one way or the other. So, and you didn't really mention prices in the presentation. The price of parking is going to have to go up from zero, one way or the other. So that's my.
Appreciate that, Roger. You have mentioned the book before, and certainly definitely raises some issues for consideration. And Michael could tell from the beginning of your presentation, you're talking about this as a scarce resource, that requires management, and we certainly recognize that. Kevin, Commissioner Morse, your turn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions. How do you account in mid-density, high density for the demand for parking from outside that area? So if it's a popular business that's going to attract customers from outside of the district, how do you account for that in your parking formula? And then the second one is, at the end of the day, when you try and come up with a formula or the number, is your bias to err on the side of having a few extra spaces or less than a few spaces?
Well, there are, I think, to answer your first question, and maybe Ian can also jump in to discuss it as well, but most of the parking regulations that we consider account for visitors coming to a particular site. I mean, that's kind of where, that's the whole nexus for creating a parking regulation. The real question is how much parking is necessary. We're trying to move in a direction of having it be more of a contextual circumstance as well as more of a market circumstance, in the sense that, from a context point of view, a place like Tyson's that has a lot of options for mode choice, if not now, then in the future as Tyson's develops. There's also higher density opportunities, and for those who would live and work in Tyson's, the accessibility of those options by foot or by bike or by a convenient Uber factor into how parking's role in those areas. It begins to diminish parking's role because there's less need for vehicle ownership by those who are working there, but also by those who may be coming to that area. If for example, if I'm living in Reston and I work in Tysons and my office is located in an area that has dining and entertainment options, then that makes it easier for me to just hop on the Silver Line and go to Tysons for my employment as well as my entertainment and dining experiences. So it has a cumulative effect of the more options that you can bake into not only the specific area, but accessing that area, it diminishes the need for having a personal vehicle, or, and if you're living in that area, potentially you can get trying to think, I'm at a loss for the right term, but being able to have like a car available on site, for example. There are developers that will set aside 10 vehicles or something like that people can use to run an errand or something like that. They don't have to own a personal vehicle, but they have a vehicle available to them if they need it. So that also, with the shared vehicle, that also provides that sort of opportunity. And I think you might have had a second question, Kevin. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I answered that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm really trying to hit. If somebody, it's very easy to get from Reston to Tysons to Reston. You got multiple options, car, excellent transit options. Maybe from Mount Vernon to Tysons or from Braddock to Tysons, you've got less options, and the car is going to be what you consider the best choice. And I didn't hear in your answer that you're still going to factor in that demand.
Well, the project is not intended to eliminate parking. It's understood that parking is still going to be needed, that people are still going to be driving. So it's really just a matter of making better choices and more informed choices about how much parking should be provided. Tysons Mall is an example that people bring up frequently. They have they go to the mall during Sundays or during the holiday season, and it's difficult to find a place to park. But at the same time, if it's during January or February, when there's less demand, then you have all this parking sitting there and not being used. So it's really trying to find a balance of parking that will be enough to serve those who need it, but not be overbuilt.
Well, I guess one of the strongest participants in that decision making would be the business in any area that feels that he has demand coming from outside the district. I won't press it further because it sounds like you're a long way from a definitive answer on that. I'll just jump to the second one, which was when you do hope to arrive at a number, I don't think you're ever going to be perfect. So is the bias to have let's weigh in with just a few extra spaces versus having maybe less than the number that you would think you need? Which way do you think you would err on?
Well, I think, one of the concepts of this project is to try to create situations where parking can be shared. And I think there are a couple of options. There was some discussion in the presentation about sharing amongst uses on a particular site. So that in that circumstance, if you have 1,000 spaces available on a particular site and you have residential uses, office uses, and retail uses, those 1,000 spaces can be flexed to meet the demand, the peak demand of each of those uses. The easiest one being office demand in the daytime, residential demand at night. So you can achieve a result of building less parking if you can manage that parking better. The other element that we're trying to encourage, and other communities have tried to encourage as well, is trying to create shared parking opportunities for public parking. There's privately operated garages that could supplement parking in a given area. There's also building in some extra spaces. I know there's some in Richmond. I have an example that I use of a residential building who built parking for the residential building, but then built extra parking that they now can charge a fee for people to pay to use that parking. So there's opportunities like that to be able to supplement parking where we find that we need it. I mean, making a decision on parking is not a science. It's not a pure science, which is why we've ended up in the situation that we find ourselves in frequently of having way more parking than we need, because people just kind of default to saying, well, I'm just going to build a lot of spaces to make sure that there's enough. But many times it ends up being more than enough, particularly for new development. So that's what we're looking at to try to make those kind of adjustments.
I mean, and I don't want to take up too much time here. I mean, I think you've done a good job of explaining that there is a cost to parking. But listening to the presentation as a whole so far in your answers, I would say, there may be a bit of a bias, against parking. And, that's all right if that's your bias. But I don't think it's an unfair question to ask. At some point, you have to give the county, the Board of Supervisors, a formula, a number. And do you think that your bias would be in that formula to have a few extra spaces or less spaces than what the demand might be?
Well, I think what we are looking at is trying to find the right size for parking based on particular uses. In our discussions, we have seen that religious assembly uses seem to have more demand for parking than the minimum requirement in the ordinance. And so we're looking at that as potentially changing the minimum requirement to require more parking for those types of uses. We've had a lot of discussions about townhouses, and there have been variable rates over the years for townhouses. And we're still hearing of experiences with parking issues at townhouses. We've also been hearing about some parking issues with multifamily in certain segments of the community. So I wouldn't say that we're necessarily biased toward less parking, but what we're trying to do is an honest assessment of what we think the average parking needs are for uses within the county, and as well as areas within the county. And so that's what we are working toward determining as we move through the project.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I see that Commissioner Sitnick, Commissioner Wessenhoff both have their hands up. I think Pete was first, but also would ask though, by the way, Kelly, I know you've got some bandwidth issues. Do you need to ask a question first? Pete, being a gentleman he is, I know he deferred to you. If you need to ask a question, move on.
No, because Pete is smarter than me, so he probably will ask my question. So go ahead, Pete.
Pete, elbow aside and ask the question.
Well,
yes.
you can save me the time, so go ahead, Kelly.
All right. I think these might be quick, Mike. Thank you to you and your team for this work. I'm one of those crazy cyclists who rides every day. So I watch the whole parking commentary very closely. So one of my questions is, how are you all taking into account or working with groups like FAB or some of the family pedestrian advocates and factoring in that small but very astute crowd who see the effects of parking and also see the effects of controlled and demand related parking, so that as cyclists, we constantly say, you know, there's this empty parking lot. Why? And why has it been empty for so long? And, you know, there's a lot of reasons for that, especially in COVID, but we're like you, we're looking at it going that space could be used so much better. So I guess my question is, do those groups also have a place at the table in this conversation? And then I have a second question, but I'll.
Sure. The answer to your question is yes. And one of the things that we are looking to establish as part of this process is a minimum requirement for bike parking. So a number of other communities have incorporated that in their ordinances. And we have begun working with FCDOT, Chris Wells's group, to begin to establish that. Also, our consultant has provided us background information on bike minimum requirements in other communities. So I think with that model, as well as some good feedback that we've already gotten from FCDOT, I think we'll be able to get there on having bicycle minimum requirements in our proposal. So I think that's a very positive thing. And it also reinforces the multimodal approach that we want to achieve to help support situations where we can have less parking. So, and walkability has also come up pretty frequently in our conversations with the community. Not only walkability within an area such as Tyson's, but also connectivity between neighborhoods and you know, even the lower density neighborhoods in Fairfax County are deficient in many ways with sidewalks and that sort of thing and trails. So while this project obviously isn't going to remedy that per se, we are well aware that walkability is a strong component of creating situations where less parking is needed because people can walk to an area or a site.
Super. My second question is, I would have never thought this would come up to me, but as you were doing the presentation, both of you mentioned that you have gone back and rethought things from what, maybe I was reading between the lines, but basically from some conversations about equity issues. And, you know, Fairfax County being so huge and having such a diverse population in terms of parking need and driving need, I would not want to be in your shoes, but were there equity issues that surprised you that you feel comfortable sharing with us? Because that's a big part of our charge as a commission, is to try to represent viewpoints from all different walks of life.
Well, one of the equity issues that does relate to parking is that a lot of small businesses are owned by minority operators, and a lot of these small businesses try to establish themselves in existing retail centers or even in industrial areas and things like that. And we've run into difficulties with on paper providing the correct amount of parking to meet the minimum requirement. And it is a challenge for people to try to navigate that, from understanding what the requirements are and also being able to meet them. And so that's one of the outcomes that we want to try to address as part of this project, is to try to make that administrative element simpler, as far as being able to establish uses independently of parking, in the sense that not being held to a very rigorous standard for parking for these uses as they're established, and also being able to essentially say the parking that's been built is adequate for the use that's being established, the new use that's being established. So we are conscious of that. There are other equity elements that are involved in the project as well, but that's one that's kind of stood out for me anyway, of, you know, if we can make the process work better and have a more simpler and approach to being able to say the parking is okay, that's something that we want to try to achieve.
This is Bill Malin. One of the things we did during our outreach, which is just beginning, we did do outreach and we provided translation services for our town halls we conducted with the supervisors. The county website can be translated in pretty much any language you want, but we have done specific translations for Spanish and Korean of the actual documents, which helps versus just a Google Translate, which is what the county website translates. So we are trying to keep that in a focus, and that certainly will be more outreach as we continue to do that. Different groups, we're going to go to groups like yours, the land use committees, but we're also asking for what other groups may not traditionally be receive presentations from zoning or LDS, and we're happy to hit those groups and do as much outreach as we can.
Super. And my last point is kind of related to the equity. And I live in Reston, where there are a lot of multifamily and townhouse developments. And this may actually be kind of an equity issue, but a lot of times people can't afford to live in our area in Northern Virginia without having, several adults in the house, and each one of them has their own car, and each one of them wants a parking place. And many of the townhouse developments in the Reston area were developed in the 70s, and they've lost a lot of their parking because of fire code requirements and that type of thing. And so it's just like it fuels more and more angst and less understanding. So does this address that in any way? And then I'll stop. It's your turn, Pete.
That's fine. We are well aware of, from the town hall meetings as well as discussions with supervisor staff, that these concerns are out there. We're going to try to see if there's a way of addressing that through the project. I'm not sure. It's sort of a retrofit circumstance in that case, and a lot of what we're looking at with the project is future development opportunities and trying to address the parking supply associated with future development opportunities. But if we can try to address that in some way, we will. It's probably going to be a cooperative effort with our team and FCDOT, since they're the ones that would be regulating on-street parking in the county. So it's a challenging circumstance. Mm-hmm. Affordability is a key issue for the county and trying to create those opportunities. So it's a tough balancing act to meet those affordability goals, but also people need to have transportation. We're hoping to, from an affordability perspective, we're certainly trying to get affordable units closer to places or within places that offer more options for multimodal connectivity. There's a recent site in Tysons that was approved for affordable development. It's the first one within the Tysons Urban Center. And so that, those types of initiatives will also help that a little bit as well.
Well, even with the new development that's coming in Reston, some of those townhouses, they may have 2 parking places. So they've got the garage plus the driveway. But in order to afford them, there's far more than 2 drivers in there. So, it's a retro issue, but it's also a continuing moving forward issue. So I appreciate that you're all aware of that. Okay, Pete, I quit.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Pete.
You did good. You took my bike question, that's for sure. So I thank you for that. Just a couple questions. One, we're talking mostly in vehicles, like automobiles. Of course, we brushed on bicycles just a moment ago, but and I'm sure someone's thought about this, but I just haven't heard it yet. Additional parking for other alternative vehicles, and giving them some sort of preference over the typical gasoline one, such as charging stations and all that stuff built into the parking scheme. But if I heard what you're doing, you're really dealing with off-street parking. So in parking lots, people's yards, driveways, all that good stuff. Is that basically right?
Yeah, our primary focus is on off-street parking, but you raise an interesting point with regard to EV. We recently changed the ordinance to allow EV parking to be counted as part of the parking field. So it's not, it's not a situation where you have to meet a minimum requirement and then you're adding on EV spaces. The EV spaces can help you meet the minimum parking requirement for a particular site.
Okay.
So that's an important change. One of the things I don't know how much discussion or how far it will get in this particular project, but there are some communities now that are exploring minimum EV parking requirements to try to encourage more growth in that area. And there's been a lot of attention. I mean, with each passing year, there's more attention given to EVs and more production of EVs. Certainly, if you watch the Super Bowl, you could see where GM and other companies are really kind of pushing that approach. So, that could become part of this project ultimately, a minimum requirement for EVs. But certainly, we've taken steps to try to encourage more EV parking with the changes to the ordinance and trying to provide a little bit more flexible criteria to be able to set up those types of spaces.
Okay. Next question is, I like your example of Christmas time, the mall, you can't park. Rest of the time, you have plenty of room. Reminds me a lot about VDOT in the way they've been just widening roads to make things better at rush hour when 80% of the time the roads are not full. So your example is good there. But in a reverse situation, don't know if you're dealing with heavy equipment parking off street, basically snow removal equipment and other equipment, which is probably parked a whole lot more than it's on the road. Are you dealing with commercial vehicles parking off road also?
Well, that is part of the consideration in the rate approach. There are a number of, and I think heavy vehicle parking is one of those rates that says that you need to have X number of spaces for the business, and then you need to account for whatever vehicles you have that are owned by the business, whether they be construction vehicles or vans or medium trucks that are owned by that particular business. So we're looking at that as part of our review of the rates to see, if it's appropriate to continue to keep that specific requirement or not. But it is certainly known quantity. I mean, one of the other things that we've been talking about is the proliferation of Amazon warehouses and other delivery companies. I mean, clearly, part of our thought process with this project is that, on the one hand, the nature of retail shopping is changing. And so you might not go to the store as much to look around or to buy things. You may have more home deliveries, but then in that regard, if you have a local warehouse, then you need to make sure that you have adequate parking for the delivery vehicles. So it's one of those push-pull situations that we frequently deal with as far as making sure that we address that circumstance as well.
Okay, thank you. One more on commercial vehicles. Talking, if you've got the big Amazon and you have room for 20 trucks or whatever parking, I understand that, and you'd figure out a good rate whether or not you'd have to have 18 spots or 22. But a lot of the heavy equipment, especially snow removal and such, are used by primarily mom and pop sort of situations where they run a business, but it's out of their house and they can't park their vehicles. So they need some place to park. And the county, I see it on Richmond Highway a lot. A whole lot of illegal parking, both in parking lots and on the road. And anytime you squeeze one end of a balloon, of course, it goes someplace else.
Right.
So have you considered how to really enforce this? Because right now, even without squeezing it, enforcement is bad. It really is. I mean, it's at least in the Mount Vernon corridor, it's not well done.
Yeah, and we've been working with Henry Stein McCartney of FCDOT to try to get our arms around that a little bit. I mean, clearly, there are a number of agencies that are involved in some respect in that, in the sense that there is, whether or not you want to impose parking restrictions, and then who enforces the parking restrictions and how frequently that's done. But then the other discussion that we've been having is trying to find places where these vehicles can be stored. We're thinking about, commercial vehicles like dump trucks, or even like utility vans and things like that. And part of the struggle that we have in the county is that there's not a lot of industrial land left or scattered about the county enough to be able to establish these types of lots, because currently the parking requirements, if you're going to do vehicle storage like that, it's in industrial districts. Yes. So maybe there's some thought about modifying that in some way to allow commercial vehicle parking to occur in other zoning districts as part of this project. But it's certainly been an active part of the conversation to try to find a solution to those problems too. Very good, Bruce. You're right. I'm glad you're working on that, because there is still commercial space available for parking. But again, like you just said, it's supposed to be industrial. So if they could maybe make a C8 where you could park those vehicles, then that would help relieve some of the stuff. So, okay. Let's see. I think you pretty well answered all my questions. I appreciate it. Thank you. No problem.
Pete, thanks very much. You're gentlemanly acts as always. I'm sort of going back and forth here because, as I suspected and feared, actually, my home computer is giving some problems. So I'm looking over at the work computer, and I may have to switch horses here in midstream in just a moment. I do have a couple questions. I don't see any other hands up. I know we're just about here at the end of the topic, but I think we can take a couple minutes because this obviously is a very important and popular discussion. If I could, noted the conversation we're just having about sort of holding different people to different standards. I'm thinking of environmental regulations where the West has benefited from the lack of regulations over the previous 100 years, and now that our economic situation is stabilized, countries that are trying to develop, now are being held to different standards. So I can easily see, having folks that need parking nearby, as you say, sort of not stores and all that, perhaps needing some other considerations. What I was going to ask particularly is recognize that this is for off-street parking. What I'm wondering is, what do you feel is missing from not looking at the on-street parking? What kinds of things, what kind of allowances do you think you can make, or discussions you'll need to have to try and include that in the story? I realize you can't eat the whole elephant. That's why it's divided. I'm just kind of wondering what you think some of the limitations might be by not focusing on the on-street.
Well, I think certainly one of the things that we are considering is circumstances where, if there's a lower parking requirement for an area, and uses get established in that area, and there is an overflow situation that affects the street area, what can be done by the county to deal with that situation. And of course, the county has residential permit parking districts, and that is one solution. I think it's one of those situations where it's almost on a case-by-case basis, in the sense that we're not expecting bad situations to occur whenever we are changing these parking rates.
Roger, I think you've got an open mic. Can you put yourself on mute, please? Thanks.
So from that point of view, we're not doing this to anticipate an off-street impact or an on-street impact by these changes. So, but certainly historically in the county, there have been situations that have had to be dealt with either by establishing a permit district or other on-street regulations to try to control the situation of parking. And one of the I think one of the other elements that we are thinking about with regard to the project is the role of on-street parking relative to off-street parking needs or minimum requirements. Someplace like Tyson's, if we are moving to a future of metered parking in Tyson's, then that can offset some of the need for on-site parking. If the metering is very robust, and I know Roger probably knows about how meters are managed in a place like San Francisco, where they set it up so that it's a pricing scheme that essentially continues to upcharge the parking to ensure that there's space available on a street, as one example. And I'm not sure, I can't speak for what FCDOT is thinking about as far as managing that with their metered parking program that they're working through, but that is one circumstance where, the street itself can be a resource that would offset the need for on-site parking.
Okay, appreciate that. Another question here. I know this could be a long one, but I don't want to get into too much detail. But we're talking about differing locations having different parking needs. Yes, absolutely. We see that. In fact, as we have put our 2020 work plan together, and we'll be talking about that here in just a little bit. We've noted the fact that obviously different magisterial districts, different locations, different needs, and so that complexity needs to be incorporated. But one thing in particular I'm wondering about, and this is a hard topic. How many parking spaces do you build? Kevin was pressing on that. I mean, that's ultimately, yes, the question, what the requirements are and things like that. So I know there's not an easy answer to this. In fact, probably isn't an answer to this, but I'm wondering how you're going to try and work through the fact of the post-COVID environment, transportation demand management, and really more teleworking. How do you plan to sort of incorporate that in whatever way you think you can into some of these parking demands? Now, I'm not envisioning that you're sort of trying to set parking regulations for every parking lot across the county, but how are you trying to incorporate that or highlight that or discuss that role of telework in perhaps the need for parking?
Ian, do you want to address that a little bit?
Yeah, there's certainly, as we continue to sort of hopefully get a return to the office, as we most folks begin to come out of the pandemic, we're certainly beginning to see more data become available as it relates to how different firms, different industries are enabling full-on work from home 100%, and as opposed to hybrid or just more flexible related activities at work. So perhaps people are working from home 2 or 3 days a week and having that hybrid. So that, you're correct. That's going to change the parking dynamic both at residences, whether or not that be a single family home or more realistically in multifamily and mixed use areas is where it's going to have the most impact on parking demand. But then also counteractively, how much parking do you need at office locations, work sites? And so a lot more information is coming out on that now as sort of additional surveys begin to get undertaken. And so as Mike said, that's certainly something we're going to be taking a look at. Do we have an answer right now? Is no is the answer.
Of course. Yeah.
But but I mean, just this may answer some of Kevin's original questions too, is that there's not going to be a single number that we come up with these parking ratios. In many instances, it may well be a minimum parking requirement. In some instances, it could be a maximum parking requirement. And also in some cases there could be a minimum and maximum, and so ultimately the developer or the county in combination with that developer can begin to pick from that range between where you can't go beneath this ratio, but you can't go above this maximum ratio, and so it's coming up with a context sensitive number related to where they are in the county, what kind of business they have, kind of history that business may well have from their experience as well, in coming up with that right size number, and so that's going to play a large part, not only in typical in what we would call typical instances, but certainly as we begin to come out of the pandemic and to ascertain what that return to the office will be. So I think that partially answers Kevin's question as well, is that could there be that sort of wiggle room to provide a little bit more than perhaps a minimum, perhaps a little bit less than what that maximum would be. It's certainly not going to be a definitive number that is, if you're developing a restaurant, it always has to be 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. It's probably going to be within that range.
That makes sense. And as I acknowledged, there is no answer yet. We're learning what about the effects, the after effects of the pandemic, and would very much like to look over your shoulder on that. We're also looking at transportation demand management, telework, and any evidence that you gather, we'd be interested in as well too. One thing I'll mention, Michael in particular, been involved in a Transportation Management Association discussion at Tyson's, and Greg Fuller has been involved in that. He might be another person to reach out to and include from sort of the TDM telework side as well, because he's been involved in some of that. He's not the only one, of course, but he has been very involved in the Tyson's TMA activity, and that's the group that I'm so far most familiar with, really trying to wrestle with. So what's the post-pandemic situation look like? And they're focusing in on Tyson's. But I will say, and kind of moving towards wrapping up because we're a little bit long here, but appreciate you raising your hand and ask come see us. We'd like you to come back, please, before you go to the Board of Supervisors, because we're very eager to see how you're trying to tackle this problem. You know, we'll learn as you do, and recognize there's no magic bullets, no easy solutions. You know, because you know, as you decide where to focus on, that's a decision itself too. And so it's a pleasure to be able to work with you and participate where we can to help wrestle with some of these big issues. And there's few issues bigger than parking. It's pretty important. So.
Well, and I mean, clearly there's a relationship between transportation and parking. So we will be back to talk to you when we have a more concrete proposal out there to discuss with the community.
Okay. Roger, I do see your hand up again.
Yeah, I'll take about 30 seconds of this.
Okay.
There was a little bit tangential to what we were talking about tonight, but it does deal with parking. There was a very good piece in the real estate section a week ago Saturday on retrofitting charging stations to already existing condominiums and apartments. The difficulty of doing this in terms of the capacity of the building to handle the charging stations, and for some, how to bill it. Because if you're in an apartment and your electric is included in your rent, then we have to have some way to meter it if you're going to have an electric vehicle. And whether you can handle a level 2 charger for 200 cars. And that's a parking issue. And these are already existing. And we have a lot of these here in Mason District. Any apartment building that was, well, even ones that are currently being built are not designed for EVs. And renters and leasers, or even condominium owners, probably in the next 5 years, you're going to have some of them with electric vehicles. How do they charge them? And everybody's going to want to charge at home overnight. So that's going to come out from behind the bushes and hit you.
Yeah, both how do you charge your car and how do you charge for charging your car?
Electricity's
not free.
Yeah, I mean, if you're living at home, like I have a level 2 charger in my garage. I don't have an electric car yet. I'm going to get one. But if you're living at home, it's easy. You just plug it in like you do your cell phone. But if you're living in an apartment or a condo and you have a parking deck underneath the building, maybe you have an assigned place. But then there's the technology of being able to put the charger in. These buildings aren't designed for it. So anyhow, think about it.
True. Kevin, one last question.
Yeah, just I wanted to briefly respond to Pete. West Springfield has a parking enforcement officer. I suspect Mount Vernon District may, and I've called ours out in Burke Center, and they're busy, but they do come out. So if you're having particular enforcement issues, I've found that the police do respond on that.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm aware of the Mount Vernon one too, and I keep them fairly busy.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
On speed dial. So, okay. Well, do appreciate it very much. Unless there's any other questions, I do think I'll move on. I also want to note the advantage here to, if you're in a room, you can see people. When you're on the teams and things like that, you can also see names. So please let me also welcome Marcus Moore and Jeff Herman as well. Glad you could join us this evening and part of the conversation. Michael, if there's any other things you'd like to mention, please do. We'll look forward to having you back. Again, please, before the Board of Supervisors, we do want to, work with you there and help understand. We're happy to share anything we learn as well too. One of the other things we're looking at here, and actually, Commissioner Sitnick and Commissioner Morris are involved in it, sort of making place and locations, and obviously, a big part of the locations how you what kind of things you build, and parking lots either one of them or something you're trying not to do. So definitely, relations everywhere, as we know.
Well, we're certainly interested in hearing your perspectives, and we will be back when we have a proposal together. As I indicated, we do want to come back and talk to you guys. And the other thing that I welcome you to do, anyone from the group, is through Calvin, or you could contact me directly as well through email if you have any thoughts or information that you want to share as we go along. Our expectation is that we'll have some sort of proposal ready, hopefully by May of this year, and then take that on the road for public input. And then looking at fall and winter to be back to the Planning Commission and the board for their consideration of a final draft proposal. So that's our general timeline at this point. We'll extend the opportunity to get more input from you guys as we move along.
Appreciate that. So I'm making a mental note, late summer, early fall kind of thing, maybe just have it on the tickle list there, so to speak. But understand the schedule can change, and we'll look forward to keeping up and doing anything we can to help out. With that, I appreciate it very much. I think Michael and Ian and Austin and William, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Very informative, very good presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, if
Have a
anyone to disappear, I would not be surprised, and we would not hold it against you. So thanks very much again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good evening. Okay. Conversation next about the TAC work plan. My plan here is not to go over the plan as we've done before. There are a couple of things I want to point out, I will admit. But the bigger item here is we are on the Board Transportation Committee's agenda on the 1st of March to present the plan. And my plan to present the plan is probably put a couple of briefing slides together, and Calvin got some thoughts there. Might need a little bit of help there just to pull some information together, but nothing too strenuous. But really what I just want to do is discuss the work plan. I'll admit I was a little apprehensive, thinking, oh gosh, I need to write something up, a 10, 15, 20 page paper. And I thought, no, I can't do that. And also, I don't think we need to. I think the outline format we've got here tells a pretty good story. We described our guiding principles, areas we're looking to focus on, some of the areas we're looking to discuss in the focus areas. We have in each case commissioners that have agreed to oversee or be involved in these areas. So grateful to everybody for signing up and doing that. And you can see your names there. The transit-oriented development, obviously Pete and Roger. Vehicle congestion, that's moi. Trails and sidewalks, Kelly and Alexis, and strategies and policies, Jeremy. And then sort of in the monitoring area, the infrastructure investments, Kevin's agreed to watch over that a little bit. Our Vice Chair, Mary Pauline Jones, has agreed to look over the flexible non-POV, which is kind of, buses and Ubers and things like that. And then new transportation technologies, that's Eric there. So I think we've got a good division of responsibilities. We'll just describe that to the board. I don't think we're going to have too much time, to be quite honest. But one thing I did want to mention here that I'd like to emphasize with them is actually in the guiding principles area. I added it, I think the time before last, I can't remember exactly. I did discuss it a little bit. And I think it's worth mentioning here is because I've got it as a goal, and I think it's something that provides a unifying principle for the work plan a little bit, which is why I want to mention it here to see if there's concerns or comments about it, because I would like to place a little bit of emphasis on it with the board, and that is the goal. Our goal here is to not just take a position on things, but to point to a solution. The idea is that, and we have, and there have been, and there will be times where we need to make a position known to the Board of Supervisors. But I think as we advise, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance a number of competing forces and factors and issues that are going on. Various advocacy groups, technical issues. We've described it here in the work plan, trying to balance a number of things. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to, respectfully kind of act on their behalf and say, well, what do we think the board should do? What kinds of things do we think they should be thinking about? So it's not just a case of we're another advocacy group, you're urging them to do X or Y. Again, we can do that where we need to, but this is really trying to come up with sort of a balanced strategy for working through things. Again, I don't want to be presumptuous and say, we'll figure this all out and tell the board what to do. That's not what I mean. But I think we are trying to put ourselves in their place and trying to, help them work through what are difficult issues. And that's why I just wanted to mention it. So open up for quick dialogue if we want. Obviously, I hope folks are, ready to do this. But if not, that's why I want to mention it just in case. Make sure we're on the same page. So. Any comments? I will say, Kevin, I can see you there. I can see you moving around, getting more comfortable. Or did you want to say something? Or I don't see any hands up. I'm not going to solicit comments, but anybody's welcome. Sorry, you're muted.
All right, thank you. I'm just getting near the end of the meeting, I know. So
we are. So no comments are required. It's in there. I've left skid marks where I showed how to drive the avoided accident, as the boss said once ago. So, I'll talk a bit about that, obviously, with the board there. So again, this presentation is going to be scheduled for the 1st of March. The BTC meeting is at 11 o'clock. So my plan is to take some leave from work and go in and do that. I think they'll be in person. We'll see. And of course, I would invite and encourage any commissioner that wants to come to please join me there. And any of them that do, unlike when Kevin came for Jeff's event, I will introduce you. Make sure the board knows you're there. I think they'd know who you are, but we will make sure that I remember my manners next time. But it would certainly be a nice show of solidarity if you're able to, again, recognize during a regular workday. That can be hard to do, but certainly, of course, you're all welcome to come.
Is that meeting going to be transcribed like ours are, so you can watch it on video?
It should be. It's on
Okay.
channel 16, I think, or the live stream. It's a board meeting, and all their meetings are streamed.
It
So
is on
you
channel
can-
16, and also you will be able to view it online, and afterward you can view it on demand. But Mr. Chairman, I'd like to let you know that the agenda is very crowded. We have 7 items, so hopefully we have like 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Mm.
But I mean not all 7 items would go to at the meeting. You know, Supervisor Alcorn and Tom would make a decision before the meeting. They usually keep like 4 or 5 items, and then hopefully we can go through that. Sorry, I didn't have time to introduce Marcus. Marcus Moore is my direct supervisor, and we will be working more with him in the future. Yeah. So do you want to introduce Marcus? If you're still there, Marcus, you want to say something?
Yes, I'm here, Calvin. And hello, everyone. Thank you. This is actually I've been an attendee to your meetings in the past, but it was in a different role. I did a few presentations for the TDM marketing section, so I have a little bit of experience of what you do. Yeah. So thank you for having me today, and I look forward to learning about a little bit more about what you all are involved in, and maybe making some contributions in the near future here.
You're not sliding Calvin away from us, are you?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You're not planning on taking Calvin away from us, are you?
Oh, not at all, not at all. Calvin will still take the lead in that. I'm just here on a support role, and like I said, just to kind of learn what's going on with the committee. So I'm actually only 3 weeks in now. This is my 3rd week, but like I said, I do have some past experience on doing the presentations for your group. So I'm happy to be here today to kind of sit in and listen.
Well, good to meet you, and we just wanted to know. I think we all agree we've been very well served by Calvin. And also, Mr. Chairman, just on Calvin's last remarks, it sounded to me like possibility that you could get bumped.
There's always that risk. Hopefully, they'll at least give us a couple minutes here to wave hi and shove the paper in front of their faces. That's all it would take as a minimum to sort of ring the bell there. But yes, recognize that could happen.
I just hope that if they do, that decision's made the day before, so you're not taking time off and either show up or be there online and get bumped. So.
Well, I'm not above a little bit of shameless lobbying or outreach beforehand, just to sort of take the chairman's temperature, not necessarily directly with him, although I'm not adverse to doing that either. See what his thoughts are, because clearly, of course, the most important thing is to let Mr. Alcorn know that we're ready to come speak, and at that point, that might be enough for him. He could join one of our meetings, or Shamali came last time. So there's a lot of ways we can do this. And yes, of course, recognize that they'll figure out how to squeeze us in whatever way is appropriate there. And the one thing that we'll just need to make sure of is that they're okay. That Chairman Alcorn and the other BTC members, maybe him on their behalf, are comfortable with the direction we're going in. That's all we need to make sure. And silence can be assent, but we'll just make sure.
Kevin, you going to join Mike?
Game time decision there.
Game day decision. Exactly.
Well, I'm going to make the same game time decision because I would like to support you, Mike.
Well, appreciate that. Us appreciate it. Yeah. So, and to tell you the truth, I will certainly, if I have more than just 3 minutes, we'll certainly be pointing out the focus areas. We'll be mentioning the commissioners that have volunteered to work in that area. I think it's important that they see that we have commissioners that have signed up to oversee particular areas. I think that's important. So, but you don't have to be there for that. I'll still do it anyway.
Want to hold your hand.
Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate that. Okay. All right. Well, Marcus, again, appreciate it. Welcome. Look forward to adding you to our outreach and work team here. And do remember those enjoyable, productive TDM conversations. So maybe we'll have a few more here, but now in your new role.
Absolutely,
well.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay. Well, with that, there's nothing to vote on. You know, do we have to approve the work plan? I guess maybe we do. I'm thinking about this very minute. Should we approve the work plan, or can I just go off and spout off, knowing that folks are behind me because I've been talking to you?
I think you brought it up and no one objected to it, so it sounds like unanimous consent.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't need
now
to
object now, forever hold your peace, I guess.
Well,
Well, it
there'll be chances to come back, but you're right. I think if you do object now would be the time to mention it.
Well, it might be a good idea for us to approve that work plan after you've talked to the board. If they then recommend some changes to it and then we make it, then we could approve it as amended and put it in as a TAC document.
Well, you know,
Or not.
We can certainly do that. I'm just wondering if certainly I'm there representing the TAC. We've had plenty of conversations about it. Everybody knows, you know, where we're at. But when we don't have something I can say, we passed the work plan unanimously, if it's unanimous, whatever, at our last meeting. And perhaps we can just do that by voice. And really maybe the thing to do is not to sort of to adopt the plan, to pick up on Roger's point, but to approve its presentation to the board transportation committee.
It sounds like a motion.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Sure. Let's go.
And this
All
is
right.
a provisional plan.
All right.
I think Mary Pauline seconded it and we just all unanimously consented.
All right, so I'll tell you what, so there's a motion to approve the 2022 work plan, actually the February 15th version. The February 15th version of the work plan for presentation to the BTC. I'll just say to the BTC. I won't say 1 March in case we get bumped, because you never know, it might happen. So there's a motion. There's a motion from Commissioner Sitnick, or actually, I think it was Commissioner Jones made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Sitnick.
Okay.
To approve the 2020 approve the presentation of the 2022 work plan, the February 15th version of the 2022 work plan to the Board Transportation Committee.
Well, I was saying you made the motion and Mary Pauline.
Am I able to make a motion? I think I can, can't I, or can I?
You have to pass the gavel.
Okay, never mind.
There we go.
I made the motion. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Commissioner Sitnick made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so there's a motion on the floor and seconded to approve the presentation of the February 15th version of the 2022 work plan to the Board Transportation Committee. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Just
Any opposed?
a point of discussion.
Yes, of course, I'm sorry, of course.
Yeah. I've kind of going to where Roger started to go to, which is a more cynical opinion here, but I think the upside of not having the motion was that if they blow it out of the water, none of our names are attached to it. But
well, actually, to be specific, that's why I was not going to have the motion. We approve the work plan. What we do is approve its presentation to the BTC.
Either way, I didn't think you need a motion, but it's on the floor, and I'm happy to to vote for it.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously by voice vote. Okay.
So we had a vote.
We did. Unanimous voice vote. So I will write up the resolution there, and we'll make a record of it. That we passed unanimously by voice vote, and ask as usual for the ability to make technical and conforming changes. But as I said, approve the presentation of the February 15th version of the 2022 TAC work plan to the Board Transportation Committee. There we go. Okay, with that, let's move on to public comments. Is there any member of the public here that would like to comment on anything? Two bars there. First you have to be here, then you want to say something. I don't think there's anybody here on either. So let's move on to other business and announcements. The March 22 TAC meeting, March 2022 TAC meeting. When I put this on here, I recognize I don't want to just talk about the work plan, but I do think we'll need to talk about the BTC presentation and what happened at our March meeting. So either those who were not able to come, those who are not able to watch it on TV, or just our discussion of what happened afterwards. That'll be on the agenda for March. We'll see how long that takes. At this point, that is the only agenda item I have identified so far. You know, there is some things. Jeremy, I know we've talked before about the West Falls Church Active Transportation Advisory Group, the Tyson's Transportation Management Group. They seem to have slowed down a little bit. I'm not sure they're ready for a presentation. You know, Blue and Yellow Line survey of their extensions and things like that. Kevin, some of your topics there, you know, the bus services from the underserved areas. I think March might be a little tough time to have a site visit. And I think if we do a site visit, we probably, I'm not sure that's something we can, our regular meeting, that's probably something we have to do during the day. You know, if we go to Dulles, and very much be interested in doing that. And then the Dulles line update as well. So is there, we have topics here to sort of as ticklers. Are there other topics perhaps that we want to consider? And the last thing I'll mention about other topics is as we present the work plan and then start executing the work plan, one of the places we'll look for topics, of course, is in the work plan. You know, in each of the focus areas, is there an area there that we need to be looking at? We've done a lot of it with the active Fairfax and things like that. Always opportunities there, but I think we'd like to look for opportunities to continue diving deeper into the work plan areas, and would love to be able to pick up with something in March as well.
Let me just give you a quick update on my conversation with Mike Felshow on the topic I raised about whether we're adequately providing transportation from underserved areas to specifically job centers. And he was very enthusiastic about it. They are working on that. They're assembling data. As far as him coming before the TAC, he's running that up the flagpole with his boss and then to Tom. And then I set up, to let us know if that's affirmative, and we can get him, on the schedule. But they are, I think, preparing to go before the board as well at some point with where they are on service. So that does remain, I think, active for a possible agenda topic, but certainly not next month.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask next month. But okay, absolutely, we'll keep it on the on deck circle there, but won't plan on that for next month then. But again, appreciate you reaching out and getting the status there. So. Do we have any other? One of the things I'll also do is after the BTC meeting, and I'm going to assume, for sake of planning purposes, we do get to make a presentation and we do get some feedback. If there's something that comes up, during the commission discussion with the supervisors, that might be something we can add to the agenda right away. Not again, we're already going to talk about sort of how the presentation goes, but if there's a particular topic area that they say, you really got to look at X or Y, and maybe that's something we can do as well. So there could be something comes out of the BTC meeting, perhaps, that we could do in March.
I mean, you don't want to leave the meeting tonight with just having the work plan on there, right? So
I'd like to have something else if possible, but if we're don't have anything yet, then we'd have to go through. And I do try and myself come up with agenda suggestions as well, but I wouldn't say I ran out of ideas because there are some things on the paper here, but I did not. I don't have anything sort of teed up myself just right yet.
Well, the silver line, and I was going to make this when you go around for announcements, I'll just tell you now.
Okay.
I jumped off a 7 o'clock Braddock District Council joint land use meeting that had two topics, signage, which was actually looking interesting if anybody's had to deal with signage in the county, but not specifically transportation related. But the second topic was the comprehensive plan amendment on noise ordinance at Dulles Airport. Mm-hmm. And the staff has put a pretty good paper together on that. And if any of the commissioners are interested, they can either reach out to me or the Braddock District Office, because that meeting was also going to be recorded and available. But even to see the document, the noise document that planning staff has prepared on Dulles Airport is interesting. So again, if you're looking for topics, not Silverline, having Mike Cooper out from MWA on how they feel about this comprehensive plan amendment. I think that's a fair topic.
Okay. My not in a position, not wanting to cut off any ideas there. I'm thinking that might be something to do in conjunction with or closer to the visit to Dulles. Perhaps. So what topic title shall I use for that so I can add it to the list of things to look at doing?
Well, you're right. I mean, and that's not a bad idea to have the Dulles Airport site visit combined with the briefing from MWA on how they feel about this comprehensive plan amendment.
Okay.
Obviously, you can't do that in March. It seems unlikely. So, but yeah, as you say that, I would do that together, make that one meeting.
Okay.
That would be the meeting. So.
That I think you're right. I think that would be.
So, a little bit out of order of it, but I had Department of Planning and Development environmental group come to our transportation meeting and report on that comprehensive plan amendment. So it's for us in Mount Vernon, it's a big deal because if you lower the thresholds on restricting building and all at airports, it's kind of undermines all the noise work we've been doing for 7 years in Mount Vernon. So it's a little touchy. It's politically touchy too. So it's full of briars.
You can't debate it tonight, Pete, but that was my point going in. But I have to tell you, reading the paper, it was a little more, and don't be frightened by it because a lot of it's attachments. So it might be a 70-page document, but I think there's maybe 15 or 20 to scan through. And what I didn't know or hadn't heard before was supposedly in the CPA, they're talking about still coming in within the 60 to 65 range of decibels. And they pointed out that other international airports use the standard. Mm-hmm. So, that took a little bit of reduced some of my ammunition against this comprehensive plan amendment. Not to say that I don't have concerns about it because I don't want anything to get in the way of utilizing that airport. That airport is a gem, and if we put in residential housing that's going to cause the FAA to want to reduce flights out of there, that goes against each other. And there's there's not going to be an easy answer because you have that whole Westfields area with the collapse of commercial development on site with the pandemic and whatnot and working from home. What do you do with that area? Yeah, it's a huge tax base. But I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by putting in residential housing that's going to impede the growth of the airport. But that paper, I think, if you haven't seen it, is worth taking a look at.
I have, and point of reference It's based on 1993 NORS levels. The latest 2019 NORS levels really draw a completely different picture, because the 1993 traffic out of Dulles was a whole lot less than it is today. So if you look at the 2019 data, that 65, it's still internationally 65 decibels is acceptable, but at the 2019 new NORS levels, those are in 70 decibel areas.
Well, I think you will. You'll bring your usual intellectual skills to that. And I'm looking forward to having you there.
So it's makes, like you said, it's interesting reading until you flip the page and go, ooh, that's old data.
Fair point.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, any two commissioners can talk about any topic at any time and be free of FOIA. So the two of you, I suspect, might have some conversations, and you know, we can talk about this in the next meeting and looking at the plan. And Kevin, do appreciate you passing on the plan so we can have a look at it. My thought is, in part because of the sensitivity of the issue, and maybe in large part because of the sensitivity of the issue, we don't have to put it on the agenda, but we can certainly talk about it in the commissioners' issues section.
Yeah.
We can talk about that at the end and just sort of see what we think, because yeah, it's a briar patch. We shouldn't be afraid of doing something, but we should be careful as we do things.
Completely careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Copy.
Yeah. Be aware.
Be very aware. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, this is the excellent topic of conversation. Not going to help us for March right away, but that's okay. Jeremy, I'm going to call you out a little bit because you know how I am. And of course, if the answer is no, I understand. I'm just wondering, do you think there's something happening with the West Falls Church advisory group that might be worthy of a presentation or discussion next month?
Yeah, we can check. It might still be early in the process because I think that they're still. I think it's like a gathering community feedback. I'll check in with them and try to get an idea of what the right timing is, though.
Okay. That's fair. I appreciate that.
Mike, I'm not trying to flog my topics, but if you go around and you're still short, I mean, the Silver Line, you know, there's all kinds of issues there now with with those rail cars out of service. The GM is quitting. You know, it could be a whole meeting in itself, but maybe not enough time to share with the work plan. But that's you know, it's a valid topic, so just keep it in mind.
Absolutely, and you know, it's a topic that we absolutely ought to cover at some point, and not a bad idea necessarily to, I'll say it this way respectfully, get it out of the way. Yeah, you know, while there's less competition, because as we go through the summer, you know, the trip to Dulles, yes, there will be work plan activities, there will be the West Falls Shores group, et cetera, et cetera. So no, I have no objection. You know, trying to talk about the Silver Line, because I think it is probably about time. It's been over a year since we've talked about it. And you're right, there is, you know, the concrete and the trains, and they're getting a lot closer to opening now. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. You know, absent, I think that's something we can try and do. Of course, then we'll have to see if WMATA can come join us, but you know, we can also try to work through that too if there's an issue there. One thing I'll mention about the Tyson's transportation management activity on transportation demand management. I sort of mentioned it earlier that they did seem to sort of slow down their progress a little bit. Their last meeting was canceled. So I'm not sure if this bespeaks a slowdown, a redirection, or whatever. But that's also not something that's ready to go in March either. So I don't know, Calvin, Marcus, what do you think the raw gut assessment here, without any basis in fact other than your professional experience? How hard do you think it'd be to have the WMATA, et cetera, the Silver Line folks come in next month?
We can try. Yeah.
Try and ask. Yeah.
We can try, but
see what they say.
Say yeah.
Okay. You know. So yeah, let's try and do that. And if that doesn't work, then we'll look for something else. And we'll find something. We'll find something.
You
So,
got your Alexis isn't on, but congratulations, and maybe there'll be an update on the safe routes to school. I don't know what discussions are going on there, but
it's possible. It's possible. And in fact, I think now that we're done with the agenda there, moving on to the chair's report. That's the first thing I was gonna mention, and certainly give props to Alexis and Kelly and Jeremy for their work in putting some stuff together there and giving some good information. We got the letter out. Thanks, Calvin, very much for shepherding that through the process there. Made it over to the board, also to the school board as well. We've also already gotten a response from Chairman McKay. He was pleased to hear our inputs. I'm not going to go over them because each of you have gotten a copy from Calvin. But I think it was an excellent thing to weigh in on. I think we did it the right way. We're thoughtful about it. We diagnosed the problem there. We talked about it, and Chair McKay's response was, "Yeah, that's probably something we can approach the school board on." Exactly what we wanted. So yes, unfortunately, Alexis isn't here to bask in the glory, but definitely some good work there, and I think it was well conceived and well executed and well received at the board's end.
and I know that my school board member appreciated getting the letter as well. So definitely interest on the school board side.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great news. The last thing I will mention is it's a bit of it's an unfortunate situation, a little delicate, but it is what it is. We've noticed, all of us, that one of our members has been missing in action continually. I did reach out to David some months ago. He did participate in the meeting for part of the meeting, and then once again, we haven't heard from him. I was talking with our vice chair before the meeting. There are, as we know, procedures for removal of commissioners who are not attending. I think it's about time to consider doing that. Now, that said, there are options here, and I do want to discuss this a bit with folks. I don't want to prejudge anybody's willingness to do this or not do this. But one option could be David says, "Hey, I can't do it. I will resign." Another is Kathy Smith could make a determination herself, and it's possible I could see her if on March the 1st, if she's there and we're there and there's time, et cetera, et cetera. Or the TAC could pass a resolution of expulsion. My view, I do not want to try and do that this evening. My thought is to reach out to David one last time and tell him that we're considering doing this. And please, you do need to come to the meetings, or else we're going to have to take action if you do not resign. It's a sensitive thing. I hate to do it. I know he's got a lot going on. He'd be a very valued member if you're able to be here, but he's not been here. And so I want to put that on the table here and sort of take the temperature of the TAC. See what folks think about getting ready to perhaps take some action there.
I think maybe the best approach is to talk with Kathy Smith. She put him here. She can have that discussion with him. Because it would be better for us not to have to expel someone. But, she was the one that nominated him, and he accepted it. And I think it would be up to her to have a discussion with him about his non-attendance for whatever reason, and it's kind of a command responsibility.
I'd have to chime in a little bit differently. If I'm doing something wrong, and maybe I don't know it, I mean, I think in his case he does, but he might want us to ask him to quit because he might be overextended. And I would reach out to him one last time and just say, are you going to stay? Are you going to go? If you're going to stay, you have to attend. And then follow up with the March 1st conversation with his supervisor and say, this is where we're at. And depending on what answer he gave you or didn't give you, would guide you in that March 1st conversation.
Good point. Good point.
Good, yes, I agree with that. That's a good way to go.
I mean, I think you have to bring it to a head. It's you know, it's been vacant too long, and by the way, I mean, I think, you know, obviously the supervisor has to be informed, but she, as far as I know, cannot make him get off if he does not want to resign. It's either he resigns or we institute the procedures and the bylaws that we passed. But you are, no matter what you do, if you do attend, your commissioner, your supervisor, as far as I know, cannot pull you back. Their only power is to not reappoint you.
Well, exactly, and that might be the decision on March 1st, is that she may decide then not to reappoint him, and that would be the most delicate way to handle it, just not reappoint.
But I think the term aren't our terms good, you know, almost everyone through June?
Yeah.
End of June.
I think the term will expire and they would renominate by June of this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have like 3-4 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to let you know that sometimes the supervisor office will send me an email or a phone call and asking for the attendance record. But I have not heard anything from Supervisor Smith. But the other supervisor, they sometimes they ask me that. Yeah.
Okay.
And just I was looking at our bylaws. So just to clarify, we don't have the ability to remove a commissioner. We have the ability to recommend to the Board of Supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
So I think certainly a conversation sounds like we need some further conversations, and certainly we would encourage his participation.
Well, I'm glad you made that clarification. I guess I should have looked at them recently. I thought when we had changed them that it was pretty specific if you missed a certain number of meetings without cause.
No, that was a discussion that I tried to encourage the change, but I was overruled in that about that change. It was that we would make it that recommendation to the board, but we're not given that power.
Then, and what authority does the board have to remove them?
The board has the authority. So we make the recommendation to the board, and then the board can either decide to go with our recommendation and remove the person, or can ignore the recommendation. But other boards, so this is not a standard template that we selected. Other commissions, you are automatically removed for attendance. So we did not just take the standard thing. But yes, that was one of those things that I did.
I can't believe you were overruled, but if I were a betting person, I would say that he, once the chairman goes to David, presents him with a choice, that he would probably resign, and we would not be forced to send a commissioner's name to the board for removal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly that would be the hope, but also one option, another one is, of course, as we were talked about it, where Supervisor Smith just chose not to reappoint him. Mm-hmm. And so he stayed with us till June, probably still not coming to meetings, and then hopefully, and then perhaps in June would have a replacement. That's another delicate way to handle it there. But I think certainly my thought has been, to reach out to David at least one more time, because I did have a conversation with him before, and when I talked to him before, that's when he came to the meeting. But then he was there for the attendance, and that was kind of about it. And we haven't seen him since.
I mean, I'm sorry that he can't, he doesn't. He does seem to be well informed, and he got us the Uber, which was a big topic of mine. But I just think it's important you give him that option, and if he does in fact want to resign, it does give the supervisor, that's 3 months that we can have a commissioner from that area. And we're, and with Dulles Airport being a, fairly important topic, might be nice to have a commissioner from that district.
It'd be helpful. it'd be helpful. And in fact, that could be something that influences our scheduling, as when I want to go to Dulles, because it'd be nice to have a commissioner from the Sully district. Put him or her right in the crosshairs of that delicate issue there. Welcome to the TAC. We're going to put you right in front on the most sensitive issue in the planet, where your supervisor is probably going to be a little dicey about how.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, but these are all considerations there. I think that one question would be whether the TAC would be willing to consider actually doing those removal procedures. If he chooses not to resign, certainly my goal would be to talk to Commissioner Smith, Supervisor Smith, and ask her, get her opinions there. And I wouldn't want to proceed with removal procedures without her knowing, what we're doing. And I'm not looking to sort of have a threat for David, but I am trying to just get a sense for, is this something, a Rubicon that we'd be willing to cross if there's really no other choice?
Well, I think if you don't, you're making a mockery of the bylaws, and truth be told, it's gone on too long. So it's not like we haven't given them the benefit of the doubt.
We
It's
absolutely
nothing
have.
personal. It's just been vacant way too long.
It's just business.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Tony Soprano would say, right?
That's right. Just business. Just business. So, yeah, but we're not going to whack him though. We're not going to go that far.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully, won't find me doing that. So, arrange for an unfortunate bus accident. Wait a minute, we're going to have a topic on buses. Never mind. Okay, this is what I needed, and this is what I wanted to bring to your attention. So I will reach out to David here at probably not tonight, maybe by tomorrow, and just tell him what's going on, and and tell him that we need to either have him come and keep coming for the meeting, or we're going to either we're going to take steps to try and remove him. So I'll figure out how to write it to word it. I'm not too worried. We'll come up. We've got the guidance here that we need. So okay, that's what I had for the chairman's remarks. I'd like to do now is we're in the home stretch, and that's to go through the commissioner's remarks. And so what I'll do is go through the order that the roll was called for those who managed to stick with us. And so first, Linda, anything you'd like to bring to the good of the order?
Nope, no remarks.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, anything from you?
No, I snuck my announcements in early. Thank you.
You did. You did a good job with that. Kelly, are you still with us? Doesn't appear to be. Okay. Roger, anything more for the group?
Yes. Last Friday, I attended the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Access for All committee meeting, of which I'm also a member, and they had a very interesting presentation there that was a little a broad feel for the Access for All. It was the TPB's climate change mitigation study results. They have a very interesting model, if you like those kind of things, and I do, that did some scenario analysis whose goal was to identify potential pathways for the region to reduce on-road transportation sector greenhouse gas emissions, to meet regional greenhouse gas reduction goals. And it was a little bit sobering, but they considered a number of different scenarios, not just electrification of vehicles, but electrification of buses and everything else. And they had covered a number of things. And if we're going to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals for 2050, we're going to have to do a lot of things. I thought it was a very interesting study. Not, of course, all these things are kind of not complete, but and I kind of wondered if they might be a topic meeting for us. If you're interested in that kind of thing, it's I'm not sure I can get them out here. But I'd be willing to try if you're interested in having them and have them present these results of this. Somewhat technical study, but they could distill it down to Reader's Digest condensed version. But to give you some idea of what we have to do in terms of making changes, and of course this is metropolitan Washington wide, we're more concerned with Virginia and Fairfax County in particular, to meet these climate change mitigation results when it's a hot topic right now, particularly as regards to transportation. So,
is there a report or something that you could ask Calvin to share with the tax? We could have a look at it and see.
yeah, I think I can do that. This is their TPP program director, travel forecasting and emissions analysis, and I'll see if I can get a copy of that and have it. I'll see if I can get it to Calvin. It's if you're having problems with insomnia, it's probably a great bedtime reading. But
there's a number of transportation reports that would serve that purpose. But yes.
But this one's a really important topic, I think, and transportation's a big part of it. And this gives you some direction of what kind of changes we're going to have to make if we're going to meet these goals and whether those goals we want to meet. It's
okay. Well, please do send a copy. Let's consider it.
I'll see if I can get one and send it around.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Roger. Anything else?
No, that's enough.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Pete, anything from you? Thanks for your tax.
Kevin also and I both shared the same topic earlier. Airport noise. Just a couple kind of FYI sort of things. The FCDOT and VDOT have been working on reducing their plan for Richmond Highway width from 13 lanes down to smaller. And I'm not hearing really good things. I'm asking them to come and speak with my local transportation committee. So that might be something that, frankly, I reintroduced to you good folks. And something being done is related to transportation, but it's stormwater runoff. Mostly for infill developments and everything. We have a gentleman, Leo, who is doing pretty phenomenal stuff at local and state levels on stormwater and actually getting some politicians to consider changing some of the rules, which would kind of help environmentally when it comes to infill development, because it was, as was brought up with parking, the parking on the house will be 3 feet higher than the next door neighbor's stuff, and then it floods the next door neighbor. So I mean, it's not the huge issue, but it's something interesting, and it might start pushing its way into our domain, but I don't think it's there yet. And that's about it, FYI.
Well, Pete, stormwater runoff is a pretty important deal with respect to parking lots.
Oh, yes.
So
yes,
any technology there is that's transportation related, and it's also pretty environmentally important.
It is. But it's just the beginning of what Leo's been doing, but he's making some pretty good strides. At some point, it might be good to get not only Leo, but the people he's been talking to come talk to us. But I don't think they're there yet.
Okay.
Pete, if I had to vote between those two topics, the Richmond Highway, I mean, that's up there with the Silver Line and Dulles. I mean, it's going to be a major corridor. I may actually be on the opposite side of you as to on the lane diet, but not as far as importance of topic. So
yes,
whenever you think that's ready to come back for the TAC, you should bring it. You should ask the chairman to put it on.
Thank you. I won't hesitate.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay. All right. Thanks, Pete. Jeremy, any last comments from you, sir?
Not for me.
Appreciate it. Well, I do not believe Alexis is with us, or Eric. David, we've been talking about. So I think the last person here is our esteemed vice chair, and we know what happens next. I will ask Marcus and Calvin to hang on for just a minute afterwards, because once she makes the motion, folks are going to scatter like rats. But with that, Vice Chair Jones, any commission comments, and the motion when you're ready.
No, and motion to adjourn.
Second.
Third.
Those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 All those opposed. 9:48 p.m. The motion carries. We are adjourned for another month. Thank you very much, everyone. Another good meeting, and we're actually out, relatively speaking, a little early. Thank you.
All right.